She thought she had it all: wealth, status, and the protection of a powerful man. But when one careless mistake exposed the truth, she became the target of a billionaire's wrath. Betrayed, hunted, and left with nothing, she had two choices: run or fight back. What happens when the man who controls everything realizes he's losing control? Stay with us, because this story is about to change everything you thought you knew about power, corruption, and redemption. Leona Mercer checked her reflection one last time in the small mirror by the entrance of her Manhattan apartment. She adjusted her silk scarf gently, smoothing the edges as if those delicate folds held her entire self-worth. Everything had to look perfect today. Her deep blue uniform was immaculate, accentuating the careful elegance she'd spent years perfecting. At 28, Liana had mastered the art of appearing calm, even when a storm brewed deep inside. Living just blocks from Central Park had seemed like an impossible dream years ago when she was growing up in a small town outside Syracuse. Now the stylish apartment, though compact and carefully budgeted, was her own private sanctuary, a symbol of the life she had built and fiercely guarded. Still, beneath the polished veneer, she felt a quiet anxiety tugging at her thoughts, whispering questions she didn't want to face. How long could she keep relying on Bradford Callahan, the powerful CEO of Attendant Group, to secure her place in this fragile world? Bradford had been generous enough: gifts, dinners, occasional trips to places she'd only read about. But their relationship was kept hidden behind carefully closed doors. Even now, she wondered if she was truly safe in his shadow. The thought made her uneasy, especially after their recent phone call. His words echoed softly in her mind, a bit colder than usual. "Things have changed, Liana. You should know better than to push." She inhaled deeply, pushed those fears away, and reminded herself of the task ahead. Today, she was scheduled to serve on a private charter flight from Northgate Private Airport down to Crystal Shores Resort in Miami. Aboard would be Ascendair's top executives and investors, people whose approval could define her future. She convinced herself that this was her opportunity, the chance to reinforce her value to Bradford and solidify her position. One successful flight, one flawless performance, and everything would feel secure again. Glancing at the clock, she realized it was time. She hurried downstairs and hailed a cab. The streets of Manhattan sped by in a blur of early morning traffic. Inside, her stomach tightened, not from nerves about the flight itself, but from the subtle sense that today would somehow be different, a tipping point she couldn't yet see. At the private airport, sunlight streamed through massive glass windows, gleaming off polished marble floors. Liana greeted her colleagues warmly, exchanging quick smiles and small talk, yet each pleasantry felt hollow. The tension remained, a quiet undercurrent beneath the friendly facade. As passengers arrived, she welcomed each with practiced grace. She took special care to greet those she recognized as influential, laughing politely at small jokes and making everyone feel valued. Yet amid the stream of wealthy and powerful faces, she noticed one man standing slightly apart. His suit was elegant but understated, his expression calm, confident without arrogance. There was something intriguing about his quiet presence, but her attention quickly returned to more familiar, influential faces. When boarding began, Liana guided passengers gently onto the aircraft, gracefully attending to every need. Inside the luxurious jet, soft music played quietly, mingling with the murmur of conversations. Her pulse quickened as Bradford appeared briefly, nodding at her with a detached smile before disappearing into the private cabin reserved for executives. She felt both relieved and unsettled by the brevity of his acknowledgement. As the plane climbed smoothly into the sky, she moved down the aisle, effortlessly serving drinks and snacks. Everyone was pleased. Every detail was going perfectly. Yet despite her outward poise, she couldn't shake off that persistent feeling of uncertainty, a shadow she couldn't fully explain. She glanced toward the quiet passenger once more. He sat calmly, gazing thoughtfully out the window. For a brief moment, their eyes met. He nodded politely, offering a subtle smile. She responded with a quick, professional nod, then immediately redirected her attention to a louder, more demanding passenger. She told herself to focus, unaware of how drastically that brief encounter would soon change her life. As the plane settled into its cruising altitude, conversations mellowed and the initial excitement slowly gave way to relaxed laughter and quiet chatter. Liana moved down the aisle gracefully, refilling champagne glasses and attending to each request with practiced ease. The low hum of the jet engines felt soothing, yet beneath her composed exterior, a restless tension lingered. Bradford's detached greeting replaying softly in her mind, over and over, refusing to fade. Halfway down the aisle, Liana noticed that same quiet passenger, the man whose understated presence she had earlier overlooked. His empty glass sat discreetly to the side, indicating he'd been waiting patiently for a refill. Without giving it much thought, she quickly poured a drink and set it down in front of him, hardly meeting his eyes. "Excuse me, miss," he said softly, his tone polite but firm enough to stop her from moving away. "Would you mind getting me a glass of water as well?" His request was simple, yet it struck a strange chord within her. Her earlier tension from Bradford's cool demeanor spilled into the moment, clouding her judgment. Turning abruptly, she forced a strained smile. "Of course, I'll bring that right away," she replied curtly, barely masking her irritation. She returned moments later with the water, setting it down swiftly, almost carelessly, and was about to move on when the man spoke again, gently but clearly. "You know, we're all here to enjoy the flight, but a little genuine kindness makes a big difference." His quiet rebuke hung awkwardly in the air, catching the attention of other passengers nearby. Liana felt a flash of heat rise in her cheeks. Embarrassed and defensive, she couldn't control the words slipping out before she realized their sharpness. "Well, perhaps you might be more comfortable flying commercial next time, if the service here doesn't meet your standards," she snapped quietly, her voice edged with disdain. The moment her words left her lips, she regretted them. But the damage had been done. The quiet hum of conversations around them fell silent. The man looked at her calmly, his eyes steady, betraying no anger, only a trace of disappointment. She stood frozen for a painful second, then quickly turned and walked away, her heart pounding as she felt the eyes of other passengers following her every step. In the galley, safely out of view, Liana leaned against the counter, fighting to regain control of her emotions. She poured herself a glass of cold water, but even as she drank it, the embarrassment burned hotly through her veins. She'd let the anxiety from Bradford's earlier detachment seep into her work, causing a scene that could put her entire career at risk. She knew better than anyone how quickly gossip could spread among these circles, how easily her carefully constructed world could unravel. The remainder of the flight passed with agonizing slowness. Each time she moved past the man's seat, she avoided eye contact, serving him quietly, mechanically. Her confidence was now replaced with self-doubt, the gracefulness she once took pride in, now stiff and forced. Every whisper, every glance from other passengers seemed filled with judgment. By the time the plane began its descent toward Miami, all she could think about was escaping the suffocating tension she had created. As the aircraft touched down smoothly at Crystal Shores Resort's private runway, Liana felt a small measure of relief. Yet as the passengers disembarked, she noticed Bradford waiting on the tarmac, speaking animatedly with a small group of guests. She stepped outside, adjusting her scarf nervously, hoping the incident on board wouldn't reach his ears. At least not yet. But the quiet passenger moved past her without another word, joining the same group around Bradford. From a distance, she watched uneasily as Bradford greeted him with unexpected warmth and respect, shaking his hand firmly, as if welcoming someone important. Turning to a colleague standing beside her, Liana's voice trembled slightly as she asked, "Who exactly is that man?" Her colleague glanced over with mild surprise, whispering cautiously, "You really don't know?" "That's Elijah Sinclair, CEO of Nimbus Aviation. He's probably Bradford's biggest rival right now." A cold shiver moved slowly down Liana's spine. She stood rooted to the spot, the reality of her terrible mistake fully dawning upon her. The casual disregard, the careless insult, she'd just unknowingly offended one of the most powerful figures in Bradford's world. As fear closed tightly around her chest, she could sense that everything she'd worked for, the security and status she'd so desperately sought, was suddenly hanging by the thinnest thread imaginable. The elegant ballroom at Crystal Shores Resort hummed gently with conversations and laughter, softened by the soothing rhythm of classical music playing discreetly in the background. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, casting a warm, golden glow over elegantly dressed guests. Yet despite the luxury surrounding her, Liana felt an icy dread coiled tightly in her chest. Since the moment she learned Elijah Sinclair's true identity, every step she took felt uncertain, every smile forced. Across the room, Bradford Callahan stood at the center of attention, confidently greeting business associates, shaking hands firmly, his laughter echoing easily through the crowded space. But each time his gaze brushed past Liana without acknowledgement, her anxiety grew. She wondered if he already knew, if the news of her thoughtless words aboard the flight had somehow reached his ears. She felt exposed, vulnerable, her carefully constructed facade showing cracks she couldn't hide. "You look lovely tonight, Liana," came a familiar voice, calm yet slightly amused. Elena Carter, Bradford's trusted communications manager, appeared beside her, holding a glass of champagne with practiced grace. Her dark eyes sparkled with hidden curiosity, making Liana wary of her intentions. "Thanks, Elena," Liana replied softly, forcing a polite smile. "You too, of course." Elena tilted her head slightly, her gaze sharp, searching. "You seem distracted. Something on your mind?" "Oh, just tired, I suppose," Liana lied smoothly, hoping her voice wouldn't betray her fear. She sipped her champagne, but the delicate bubbles tasted bitter tonight. Elena's eyes narrowed briefly, clearly unconvinced. "Well, Bradford has been asking about you," she said casually, swirling her drink. "He seems concerned." Liana's heart jumped. "Concerned?" "Let's just say he's noticed you seemed a little off since we landed," Elena replied cryptically, her tone suddenly cooler. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice slightly. "Just be careful, Liana. You know how quickly things change around here." Before Liana could respond, Elena moved gracefully into the crowd, leaving behind a lingering sense of dread. Glancing nervously across the room, Liana spotted Elijah Sinclair deep in conversation with Bradford, their discussion clearly serious. Elijah's calm presence seemed even more imposing now, his quiet confidence illuminating the stark difference between them. She couldn't help feeling a sense of admiration tangled deeply with shame and regret. Suddenly Elijah turned, his eyes briefly meeting hers. She expected anger, disdain, something sharp, but instead saw only quiet disappointment. That gentle look pierced deeper than harsh words ever could. Quickly she averted her gaze, ashamed. Moments later, Bradford approached her, his steps measured, face unreadable. Her pulse quickened as she searched his eyes desperately for reassurance. "Liana," he said quietly, glancing around to ensure no one overheard. "I need you to pay attention to Elijah Sinclair tonight. Listen closely. We need to know anything we can use against him." His request hit her like ice water. "Use against him?" she repeated softly, disbelievingly. "Yes," Bradford confirmed, his voice firm and cold. "This isn't a game. I trust you'll do what's needed." He walked away without another word, leaving Liana standing alone, stunned by his harsh tone. The reality of Bradford's true nature slowly became clearer. She was merely a tool, disposable if she failed to serve his purposes. She took a shaky breath, her hand trembling slightly as she reached for another glass of champagne. Her eyes drifted again toward Elijah, who was now sharing a friendly laugh with guests. His authenticity was unmistakable, the very opposite of Bradford's carefully curated facade. Watching him, she felt an unfamiliar longing, a yearning to be free from the exhausting burden of constantly performing, pretending, and pleasing others. As the evening wore on, Liana kept her distance from both Bradford and Elijah. She moved mechanically among the guests, her heart heavy, her thoughts tangled. Just as she considered slipping away unnoticed, her phone buzzed sharply in her handbag. With a tight feeling in her throat, she glanced down at the screen. A message from an unknown number stared back at her. "I know exactly what happened on the flight today. We need to talk." Her stomach twisted sharply as panic set in. Someone else knew, and now everything was spinning rapidly out of her control. The following morning, the Bayfront Brew Cafe offered a tranquil escape from the glittering chaos of the previous night. Soft jazz played quietly over the cafe speakers, blending gently with the hum of conversation and the comforting aroma of freshly brewed coffee. Yet even in this soothing atmosphere, Liana felt her anxiety tighten like an invisible grip around her heart. She sat at a secluded table near the window, nervously stirring sugar into her coffee, though it had long since dissolved. Every few seconds, she glanced up anxiously, awaiting the arrival of the mysterious sender of last night's cryptic message. Outside, morning sunlight danced gently on the waves of Biscayne Bay, but her thoughts were clouded by uncertainty. "Good morning, Ms. Mercer," a familiar, calm voice said softly, startling her from her restless thoughts. Liana looked up sharply, her pulse racing. Elijah Sinclair stood quietly beside her table, his expression serious yet surprisingly gentle. He motioned politely toward the chair opposite her. "May I?" "Of course," she replied softly, swallowing hard. Her voice trembled slightly despite her best effort to sound composed. She couldn't quite meet his gaze. Elijah took his seat calmly, studying her quietly for a moment. Finally, he broke the silence gently, without any accusation or anger in his tone. "I wanted to meet privately because what happened yesterday matters, Liana. Not just to me, but I believe also to you." She hesitated, gripping the coffee cup tighter, her knuckles whitening. "I owe you an apology," she murmured quietly, eyes downcast. "My behavior yesterday was unacceptable. There's no excuse." "I appreciate your honesty," he replied warmly. His voice held no judgment, just sincerity. "But this isn't merely about apologies. It's about confronting why you acted that way." She raised her eyes slowly, meeting his steady gaze. "I don't have a good answer," she admitted quietly. "I was upset about something else and took it out on you. It was wrong. Completely wrong." Elijah nodded slowly, understandingly. "We've all faced moments when our fears control us," he said softly, his voice carrying a depth of compassion that surprised her. "I grew up facing judgment, too. People who saw only my color, not me. Yet bitterness never served me well. Instead, it taught me compassion and strength." Liana's eyes welled unexpectedly with tears, touched by his kindness and wisdom. His words resonated deeply within her, offering clarity she had been avoiding. She took a shaky breath, realizing how empty and superficial her choices had been. "I spent years chasing security and validation from others," she confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "But now, I see that I lost myself along the way." Elijah's gentle smile was reassuring. "It's never too late to rediscover who you really are," he encouraged softly. "But first you have a decision to make. Will you stay silent, letting fear guide your life? Or will you step forward and do what's right?" Before she could answer, her phone buzzed urgently in her purse. She glanced at the screen quickly and saw Bradford's name flash angrily. A shiver ran down her spine. She looked up at Elijah again, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "I'm not sure I have the strength," she admitted honestly. "Bradford has control over everything. My career, my security, not everything," Elijah interrupted gently, leaning in slightly. "He doesn't control who you truly are. No one does but you." As they spoke, a flash caught her attention outside the cafe window. A photographer stood across the street, capturing their meeting discreetly before quickly disappearing into the crowd. A wave of panic surged through her veins as she realized the depth of trouble she was now in. Elijah followed her gaze, understanding instantly. "Listen," he said calmly. "If you choose truth, I'll stand with you. You won't face this storm alone." His words offered comfort, yet fear still pulsed through her chest. The cafe seemed suddenly smaller, tighter. Her mind raced, knowing full well that her decision would shape the rest of her life. Yet deep within her, a quiet strength emerged, a resolve she'd never felt before. Taking a deep breath, she met Elijah's eyes directly, finally finding courage in her own voice. "I won't let fear rule me anymore," she said clearly, feeling strangely liberated. "I'm ready to face the truth." Outside, sunlight filtered softly through the cafe windows, gently warming the table where they sat. But inside her heart, Liana Mercer felt as if she'd just stepped into the first clear morning she'd seen in a very long time. Bright sunlight flooded the sleek office space of Ascendair's Miami headquarters, glinting sharply off polished glass surfaces and sleek metallic furniture. But to Liana, the daylight felt harsh and unforgiving, exposing every hidden fear she'd tried desperately to bury. Bradford Callahan stood near his expansive desk, hands shoved deep into his pockets, his eyes fixed coldly upon her. "You've disappointed me, Liana," he began quietly, his voice deceptively calm. "You know how delicate our position is right now, and yet you chose to jeopardize it." She stood before him, pulse racing, feeling trapped in the sterile confines of his lavish office. "Bradford, I swear nothing inappropriate happened," she pleaded softly, her voice unsteady. "It was just a simple misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" he interrupted sharply, his eyes narrowing dangerously. "Your little secret meeting with Elijah Sinclair is all over social media. It looks to me like betrayal." "It wasn't like that," she stammered, anxiety tightening her throat. "Please, just let me explain." He stepped closer, his tone turning icy. "Let's be clear. You're valuable only as long as you play your part. Cross me, embarrass me, and you're disposable. Understand?" His cruel words sliced through her carefully maintained composure. Liana felt a sharp sting of humiliation as tears threatened to betray her. She clenched her fist tightly, willing herself not to show weakness in front of him. "Yes, I understand," she whispered finally, bitterness coating each word. Bradford stared at her coldly a moment longer before turning abruptly away. "Elena warned me about you," he added casually, eyes drifting to the distant Miami skyline. "I should have listened." As she turned to leave, heart aching, Liana overheard Bradford's hushed voice through the partially open door. She paused instinctively, listening intently. "Elena, we'll pin this entire disaster on Liana," he murmured softly, voice utterly devoid of compassion. "Let's leak something damaging about her. No one will question her guilt." Stunned, Liana felt her stomach twist painfully. Bradford, the man she'd trusted, relied on, given herself to, was calmly planning to destroy her. Betrayal cut deep, shaking her core. Her entire life had been built on false assurances. Now it threatened to collapse entirely. Heart racing, she retreated quickly to the elevators. She fought back tears, gripping the railing tightly as the elevator carried her swiftly downward. Outside in the bustling streets of Miami, the world moved on, unaware of her inner turmoil. Lost and isolated, she wandered aimlessly, desperation growing within her. Finally overwhelmed, she found herself dialing Elijah Sinclair's number, hands trembling. After a brief pause, Elijah's reassuring voice answered warmly, immediately sensing her distress. "Liana, are you all right?" "I need your help, Elijah," she whispered urgently, fighting tears. "Bradford, he's planning something terrible. I don't know what to do." Elijah's calm voice steadied her. "Meet me at Nimbus Aviation's office downtown," he instructed gently. "We'll face this together." She hung up, breathing a sigh of relief. The weight of her fear had eased slightly, but uncertainty lingered. Trusting Elijah meant fully turning away from Bradford, the man who'd controlled her life for years. Yet as she stood on that crowded street corner beneath the glaring Miami sun, Liana felt a quiet resolve forming within her. Perhaps Elijah was right. Maybe true strength lay not in security or power, but in the courage to stand honestly for something meaningful. She walked forward decisively, blending into the bustling crowd, determined to reclaim control over her own life, no matter the cost. The lobby of Nimbus Aviation's downtown Miami headquarters was modest yet tasteful, its simplicity a stark contrast to the extravagant offices she'd grown accustomed to at Attendant. Sunlight filtered gently through wide glass windows, touching softly on warm wooden furniture and tranquil green plants placed thoughtfully around the room. As Liana waited nervously, the calm surroundings felt strangely comforting, like a quiet reassurance in the midst of chaos. Elijah appeared from the hallway moments later, walking toward her with the easy confidence that had first caught her attention. Yet his expression today carried gentle concern, softening the edges of his strong demeanor. "Thank you for coming, Liana," he greeted kindly, offering her a reassuring smile. "Please, let's talk privately." He guided her toward a small conference room down the corridor. Inside, she settled into a comfortable chair opposite Elijah, clasping her hands anxiously on the polished wooden table. "I appreciate you meeting me, Elijah," she began quietly, trying to steady her voice. "I honestly don't know who else to turn to." He leaned forward gently, eyes earnest and compassionate. I promised you wouldn't face this alone, and I meant it. Now tell me what's happened." Liana took a deep breath, and slowly she recounted everything she'd overheard Bradford say. The coldness in his voice, the ruthless betrayal, and his plans to publicly destroy her reputation. Elijah listened intently, his calm presence providing strength as she revealed every painful detail. When she finished, Elijah exhaled slowly, processing the enormity of what she'd shared. His voice was calm yet firm when he spoke again. "Bradford is clearly desperate. Desperate people make dangerous decisions. We must act quickly to protect you." She nodded nervously. "But Elijah, I'm afraid of what he might do. Bradford is powerful. He has connections everywhere, and I have nothing to protect me." "You have the truth," Elijah reminded her softly, sincerity lighting his eyes. "That's your greatest strength now. It's the one thing Bradford can't control." Liana hesitated, tears forming unexpectedly as a wave of vulnerability crashed over her. "All my life, I chased security in places that felt safe. Money, influence, people like Bradford. But now everything I built is crumbling around me, and I don't know how to be strong without those things." Elijah reached across the table gently, placing a comforting hand over hers. "Strength isn't the absence of fear," he said quietly, his words filled with conviction. "It's choosing to stand despite it. You have more courage than you realize, Liana." His words resonated deeply, stirring something within her. Perhaps she'd been mistaken all along. Real strength wasn't found in wealth or status, but in facing fears head-on and standing up for what truly mattered. Just as she began to speak, Elijah's phone buzzed abruptly. Glancing quickly at the screen, his brow furrowed slightly. "Excuse me a moment," he murmured, stepping briefly into the hallway. In his absence, Liana stood, pacing slowly around the small room, anxiety swirling once again. Moments later, Elijah returned, his expression serious, tense. "What's wrong?" she asked nervously, sensing the shift in him. "Elena Carter knows you're here," Elijah revealed softly, clearly concerned. "She's already alerted Bradford. They're watching us closely." A sharp pang of panic tightened Liana's chest. "What do we do now?" Elijah remained calm, focused. "We move carefully. Bradford wants to intimidate you, but if we act boldly, decisively, reveal the truth publicly, he loses his power over you." Liana inhaled deeply, gathering courage. "You're right. I've hidden behind lies and fear long enough. It's time to take control." He smiled warmly, admiration clear in his gaze. "Then let's show Bradford and everyone watching what real courage looks like." As Elijah spoke, Liana felt the first true sense of peace she'd experienced in a very long time. Though uncertainty still loomed, she now stood at a crossroads. One path led back to fear and manipulation, the other toward authenticity, strength, and true purpose. For once, the choice was clear. Back in her Manhattan apartment, the night seemed heavier than usual, with silence draping itself over her like a thick blanket. Liana stared blankly out her window at the glittering city below, its lights pulsing softly as if life continued normally, untouched by the turmoil she felt within. Every instinct told her she'd reached a turning point, a moment from which there was no going back. Suddenly, the quiet was interrupted by a soft knock at her apartment door. Hesitant, almost cautious, she moved carefully toward it, her pulse quickening. "Who's there?" she asked softly, voice trembling slightly. "It's Elena," came a familiar, strained voice from the other side. "Please, Liana, open up. It's urgent." Surprised and wary, Liana slowly unlocked the door, opening it just enough to see Elena Carter standing nervously in the dimly lit hallway. Her face was pale, eyes anxious, carrying an expression of someone burdened by a heavy secret. "What do you want, Elena?" Liana questioned cautiously, suspicion tightening her voice. "Listen, please," Elena pleaded quietly, glancing over her shoulder nervously. "Bradford is planning something terrible for you. He's going to frame you completely for everything that happened, every scandal, every mistake. You'll lose everything." Liana felt her chest tighten sharply. "Why should I believe you? You betrayed me already." "I know I've done terrible thing," Elena admitted desperately, her voice breaking. "But he's turning against me, too. Bradford's dangerous when he's cornered. I want out. I'm here to help us both escape this mess. Liana hesitated, torn between suspicion and hope. Elena's fear seemed genuine, yet trusting her again felt dangerously naive. Finally, she stepped aside quietly, allowing Elena to enter. Inside the apartment, Elena spoke quietly, revealing shocking details of Bradford's plans to destroy Liana publicly, with falsified documents, leaked emails, even fabricated evidence. Every word drove Liana deeper into despair, yet it also ignited a fierce anger within her. How can we possibly fight this? Liana asked, voice filled with desperation. He's too powerful. No one will believe me. That's exactly what he expects, Elena said firmly, eyes determined. But I have access to documents, real evidence of Bradford's corruption and illegal activities. If we work together, we can stop him before it's too late. Liana stared at her uncertainly, heart pounding, caught once more between safety and risk. Elena extended her hand hesitantly, offering an uneasy alliance. Help me bring Bradford down, Elena urged softly. It's our only chance. Liana hesitated, a part of her longing to seize Elena's offer. Safety, revenge, protection. But Elijah's words echoed strongly in her memory, reminding her of another path, a path grounded in honesty, bravery, and integrity. Finally, she shook her head gently, stepping back from Elena's outstretched hand. No, she whispered quietly, surprising even herself with the strength behind her voice. I won't trade Bradford's lies for more deception. If I fight, it'll be with the truth. Elena stared at her in disbelief, her expression turning cold. You're making a terrible mistake, Liana, she warned sharply, turning quickly toward the door. Before leaving, she looked back one final time, her voice edged with bitterness. I tried to help you. Remember this moment when everything falls apart. The door clicked shut behind her, leaving Liana standing alone, trembling slightly yet resolute. She knew she'd made a dangerous enemy tonight, but also felt a quiet pride in finally trusting her own instincts, no matter how terrifying they seemed. She moved slowly back toward the window, gazing out over the city once more. New York's light still shone brightly, indifferent to the secrets and shadows hidden within the apartments and offices below. But tonight, as uncertainty swirled around her, Liana felt a newfound strength rising steadily in her chest. No longer would she hide behind fear or deception. She had chosen truth, honesty, and perhaps at last the freedom she had sought for so long. Early the next morning, Liana walked briskly through the bright, airy terminal at Northgate Private Airport, her heels clicking sharply against polished marble floors. The familiar routine, once comforting, now felt strained and hollow. She sensed curious eyes watching her, whispers trailing quietly behind her steps, a subtle discomfort following closely at her heels. Before she reached her assigned aircraft, a stern voice called from behind. Ms. Mercer, a moment, please. She turned quickly, startled. A senior airport official stood there stiffly, an uncomfortable expression on his face. I'm sorry, he began awkwardly, shifting slightly, but I've been instructed to inform you that your services are no longer required at Attendant, effective immediately. His words hit her like a physical blow, leaving her momentarily breathless. No longer required? She echoed softly, voice trembling slightly. I don't understand. I'm sorry, Ms. Mercer, he repeated, eyes sympathetic but powerless. It's out of my hands. Embarrassed and humiliated, she felt eyes from all around silently judging her. Struggling to keep her composure, she gathered her belongings swiftly and left the terminal without another word. Her career, her security, her carefully constructed life all shattered instantly by Bradford's cruelty. Outside, the cold air bit at her cheeks, mirroring the bitterness she felt within. Her phone began buzzing insistently in her handbag, unknown numbers flooding her screen with anonymous threats, warnings, even accusations. Fear rose quickly, choking her breath. Bradford's power stretched deeper and wider than she'd ever imagined. Desperate for support, she dialed Elijah's number. Each unanswered ring deepened her dread, as hopelessness settled heavily in her chest. Alone, she wandered the bustling streets aimlessly, the bright city around her now seeming bleak, indifferent to her suffering. Finally, driven by a desperate clarity, she decided there was only one path left, revealing the truth publicly. She quickly arranged a makeshift press conference at a modest Manhattan hotel. Moments before stepping onto the small stage set up hastily in a quiet conference room, her phone buzzed sharply again. Elijah's calm voice greeted her, softly, warmly. "I'm sorry I couldn't answer earlier. Are you all right, Liana?" Tears stung her eyes instantly, relief flooding through her. "Elijah, I'm scared. Bradford fired me and people are threatening me. I don't know what's going to happen next." His gentle reassurance steadied her immediately. "Stay calm," he urged soothingly. "You're doing the right thing. I'm on my way right now. Together, we'll face whatever comes." Taking strength from his words, she stepped onto the small stage, lights glaring harshly. Before her sat a modest group of journalists, cameras pointed directly at her, waiting expectantly. She cleared her throat nervously, took a deep breath, and began. "I called you here today to share the truth about Bradford Callahan and Attendant," she said steadily, voice trembling slightly but filled with determination. "They've lied, cheated, manipulated, and I have the evidence to prove it." The room erupted with questions, cameras flashing intensely. Her heart pounded fiercely, but she stood firm, answering confidently, driven by her newfound courage. Yet just beyond the bright lights, she suddenly spotted Elena Carter, standing quietly at the edge of the crowd, an enigmatic smile on her lips. Elena's presence sent a chill down her spine, warning her that this battle was far from over. Still, as the cameras continued flashing and questions swirled around her, Liana knew she had crossed the threshold into the storm, but for the first time, amidst the chaos, she felt genuinely free. Inside the small conference room, the flurry of camera flashes and shouted questions created an atmosphere that threatened to overwhelm Liana. Yet she stood resolute, holding on to the podium for strength. Suddenly, murmurs rippled through the crowd, and heads turned as Elena Carter stepped boldly into the spotlight, interrupting sharply. "Excuse me, everyone," Elena called out firmly, commanding immediate attention. Her voice dripped with a cold confidence that sent a shiver down Liana's spine. "I'm afraid Ms. Mercer isn't telling you the whole truth. She's not a victim. She's an opportunist trying to extort Attendant and Bradford Callahan for money." Gasps filled the room, followed swiftly by stunned silence. Liana felt the floor shifting beneath her feet as Elena confidently held up fabricated emails and documents, fake evidence accusing Liana of blackmail and betrayal. Cameras snapped furiously, capturing every devastating lie Elena calmly spun. "That's not true," Liana pleaded desperately, voice shaking, fighting tears. "These documents are fabricated. I'm innocent." But the damage was done. Doubt clouded every face staring back at her. The betrayal by Elena felt even more brutal, a knife twisting cruelly into an already wounded heart. Then, just as despair threatened to crush her entirely, Elijah Sinclair pushed quietly through the crowd, stepping confidently onto the stage beside Liana. His calming presence instantly steadied her, restoring hope. "Elena, you've twisted the truth long enough." Elijah's voice resonated strongly, silencing the murmurs. "It's time everyone saw your real evidence." He produced a small USB drive, raising it visibly in front of the cameras. Elena's eyes widened in shock, her facade quickly faltering. "This drive," Elijah continued evenly, "contains recordings Elena herself made of Bradford's own words. His admissions of corruption, threats, and his deliberate attempt to frame Liana Mercer." Elena stood frozen, stunned and helpless, as Elijah handed the USB confidently to a nearby reporter. The room buzzed again with fresh astonishment. "Why, Elena?" Liana asked softly, voice thick with pain. "Why did you lie?" Elena hesitated briefly, shame finally flickering across her carefully controlled expression. "Because I had no choice," she whispered bitterly, turning quickly and fleeing the room as reporters shouted after her. Elijah placed a gentle hand on Liana's shoulder, guiding her from the glaring lights towards safety outside. As they stepped away, she glanced back, glimpsing Bradford Callahan watching the broadcast from a distant screen in a nearby cafe. His face twisted angrily, eyes burning with rage. Bradford picked up his phone, dialing swiftly. His voice was low, dangerous, chilling. "This has gone far enough. Take care of it. Now." Across the street, unaware of his menacing order, Liana stood close to Elijah, absorbing the gravity of what they'd just unleashed. Despite the fear pounding in her chest, she felt a growing certainty that they'd finally begun dismantling Bradford's carefully built empire of lies. But as evening fell gently over the city, she knew the battle was not yet over. In fact, it had only just begun. In the days following the explosive press conference, media coverage swirled relentlessly around Liana, pushing her private turmoil into harsh public view. Though Elijah's decisive evidence had begun shifting public opinion, Bradford Callahan's powerful influence still cast a dark shadow over their lives. The threats intensified quickly. Anonymous phone calls at midnight, letters slipped beneath her apartment door with frightening promises. Elijah faced similar harassment, strange accidents and unexpected obstacles within Nimbus Aviation, small sabotages that signaled the growing desperation of Bradford's retaliation. One evening, in Elijah's modest office downtown, Liana paced anxiously, feeling the weight of uncertainty pressing heavily upon her shoulders. "Elijah," she finally said softly, exhaustion evident in her voice, "Bradford isn't going to stop. How far do you think he'll go?" Elijah paused thoughtfully, looking up from his paperwork, his expression serious yet comforting. "As far as we let him," he replied gently. "He thrives on fear. If we refuse to be intimidated, his power fades." Before Liana could respond, Elijah's assistant burst into the office, eyes wide with urgency. "Mr. Sinclair, Elena Carter, she's been kidnapped." Stunned silence filled the small room. Elijah stood swiftly, gripping the edge of his desk. "Kidnapped? By whom?" "We're not sure yet, but the police suspect Bradford's involvement," the assistant explained anxiously. "He's becoming desperate." Liana felt her stomach twist with dread. "Elijah, this is because of us." Elena was caught in the middle. He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder, steadying her. "We can't blame ourselves. Right now, Elena needs our help more than ever." Moments later, Elijah's phone buzzed urgently. A single image flashed on screen. Elena, bound and frightened, sitting helplessly in a dimly lit room. Beneath it, a chilling message appeared. "Withdraw your accusations immediately, or Elena disappears permanently." Fear tightened its grip on Liana's throat. She looked at Elijah, panic clear in her eyes. "We have no choice. Bradford has us trapped." Elijah's voice remained calm, even as his eyes hardened with determination. "No, Liana, this is exactly what Bradford expects. Our surrender. We must stand firm." "But Elena's life will save her," Elijah interrupted gently but firmly. "But giving in to Bradford now means this cycle never ends." She stood quietly, absorbing the reality of their situation. Every choice felt heavy, dangerous. Yet Elijah's unwavering strength stirred something deep inside her, a courage born not from certainty, but from conviction. Finally, she met his gaze with newfound resolve. "Then we fight," she said quietly, voice steady despite lingering fear. "Together, no matter what happens." Elijah nodded slowly, a proud smile crossing his lips. "Together," he echoed warmly, moving swiftly to his desk. He began dialing authorities, mobilizing every resource at their disposal, determined to confront Bradford's darkness head-on. As night fell quietly over Miami, Liana knew they were walking directly into danger. But for the first time, she felt confident in facing whatever lay ahead. Not because fear had disappeared, but because she had chosen courage over silence. The dim glow of the Miami skyline flickered outside as Liana sat in Elijah's office, her fingers tracing anxious patterns on the desk's smooth surface. The silence between them was heavy. Both knew that time was slipping away, and Elena's fate hung precariously in the balance. The ransom message had given no deadline, but Bradford was not a patient man. Elijah stood near the window, his arms crossed, deep in thought. "We need to approach this carefully," he said, his voice calm but edged with urgency. "We can't risk playing into Bradford's hands, but we can't wait for the police to act either. He controls too much." Liana clenched her fists, frustration bubbling beneath her surface. "Then what do we do?" she demanded, her voice rising slightly. "We can't just sit here while he—" She stopped, inhaling sharply, forcing herself to breathe. Elijah turned toward her, his expression unwavering. "We force his hand." Liana frowned. "How?" Elijah pulled out his phone and placed it on the desk. We make it public. If Bradford's trying to keep this quiet, the last thing he wants is a media frenzy. Liana hesitated. But what if that puts Elena in even more danger? Elijah met her gaze steadily. Right now, he's holding her as leverage because he thinks he still has control. If we remove that leverage, if the world is watching, he'll have no choice but to let her go. A tense silence settled between them. It was a dangerous plan, but the alternative, waiting for Bradford to make the next move, felt worse. Liana exhaled slowly, then gave a small nod. Okay, let's do it. Within minutes, Elijah had called a trusted journalist from a national news outlet, someone who had no ties to Attendant. The moment the story broke, social media exploded with outrage. Elena Carter missing, Attendant CEO under suspicion, flooded timelines and news cycles. Liana's heart pounded as she watched the news unfold in real time. There was no turning back now. Moments later, Elijah's phone buzzed. A blocked number. He answered immediately, putting it on speaker. A deep, controlled voice filled the room. That was a mistake. Bradford's voice was sharp, laced with restrained fury. Elijah leaned forward. Then let her go. A low chuckle. You really think you can outmaneuver me, Sinclair? Bradford sneered. You just signed her death sentence. Liana's breath hitched, but Elijah remained unfazed. No, Bradford. The whole country is watching. You can't make her disappear without bringing yourself down with her. A silence stretched over the line. For the first time, uncertainty flickered in Bradford's voice. You don't understand who you're dealing with. Elijah's tone turned cold. Neither do you. The call disconnected. The room felt suffocatingly quiet. Liana turned to Elijah, her hands shaking. Did it work? Elijah exhaled slowly. We'll find out soon enough. They waited, the seconds stretching unbearably. And then, Liana's phone buzzed with a message. A grainy photo of Elena sitting in a warehouse, hands bound but alive. Below it, a single message. Come get her. Alone. Elijah's jaw tightened. It's a trap. Liana swallowed hard, her resolve hardening. I don't care. We're going. Elijah met her determined gaze and gave a single nod. They were walking straight into Bradford's hands. But this time, they were ready to fight. The drive to the warehouse felt like an eternity. The city lights blurred past the windows as Liana sat in the passenger seat, her hands clenched tightly in her lap. Elijah gripped the wheel firmly, his focus sharp, yet she could feel the tension radiating from him. This is reckless, he muttered. Bradford won't just let her go. He's planning something. I know, Liana admitted, voice steady despite the fear churning inside her. But we can't leave Elena there. He's losing control and desperate men make mistakes. Elijah glanced at her, then exhaled. We go in together. No matter what happens, we stay close. As they neared the destination, Elijah slowed the car, pulling onto an empty side street. The warehouse loomed ahead, an old industrial building on the outskirts of the city, its rusted exterior barely illuminated by a single flickering street lamp. The silence was oppressive. Liana's phone buzzed, a single message from an unknown number. Inside, no tricks. Elijah reached into the glove compartment, retrieving a small voice recorder. Keep this in your pocket, he instructed. No matter what happens, we get his confession. Liana nodded, slipping it discreetly into her coat. They stepped out of the car, moving cautiously toward the entrance. The massive metal doors were slightly ajar, an invitation they knew better than to trust. Elijah pushed them open carefully, revealing a dimly lit interior, scattered crates, the scent of oil and damp metal filling the air. Then they saw her. Elena sat on a wooden chair in the center of the warehouse, wrists bound, a cut on her cheek. She was conscious but pale, her expression wary as she met Liana's gaze. I told you not to come, she murmured. A slow clap echoed through the space. From the shadows, Bradford Callahan emerged. He was calm, too calm, his expensive suit pristine despite the grimy setting. A smirk played on his lips as he studied them. Liana, Elijah, he greeted smoothly. So predictable. Liana's stomach twisted. Bradford gestured lazily. You two have caused me a great deal of inconvenience. Leaking false accusations to the media, stirring up drama, and now you force my hand. Elijah took a step forward, his voice even. Let Elena go, Bradford. This ends tonight. Bradford chuckled. You think you're in control here? He shook his head. Let's be realistic. Liana, you've already lost everything. Your job, your reputation. If you two walk away now, I can make this all disappear. Liana's blood boiled. Even now, he thought he could manipulate her, twist reality in his favor. You don't get to decide that anymore, she said, her voice steady. The truth is out. Bradford's smirk faltered slightly. Truth? He scoffed. The truth is whatever people believe. And right now, the world believes you're nothing but a bitter ex-employee. Elijah's jaw tightened. That's why we recorded everything, Bradford. Bradford's expression darkened instantly. You see, Elijah continued, this whole conversation, every threat, every arrogant admission, it's all on tape. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Bradford's face before he quickly masked it. But Liana saw it, the first crack in his confidence. Let her go, Elijah said again, firmer this time, or this recording goes public. Bradford exhaled sharply, running a hand through his hair. For the first time, he seemed unsure. Then, with a curt nod, he motioned toward his men. Untie her. One of the guards stepped forward, cutting Elena loose. She winced but stood shakily, her eyes darting between them. Liana moved toward her instinctively, helping steady her. Are you okay? She whispered. Elena gave a weak nod. Better now. Bradford watched them for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then with a forced smile, he stepped back. Enjoy your victory, he murmured. For now. Liana didn't wait for him to change his mind. Gripping Elena's arm, she moved swiftly toward the exit with Elijah close behind. The moment they stepped outside, the cool night air filled her lungs, sharp and cleansing. The weight of fear, of uncertainty, finally began to lift. But as they reached the car, Elijah spoke quietly, his gaze still fixed on the darkened warehouse behind them. This isn't over, he murmured, and Liana knew, deep down, he was right. The night air outside the warehouse was thick with tension. The moment Liana, Elijah, and Elena reached the car, Elijah turned sharply, scanning their surroundings. His instincts were rarely wrong, and something about the ease with which Bradford had let them go felt too neat, too staged. We need to move, Elijah said urgently, unlocking the car. Now! Liana helped Elena into the back seat, her hands still shaking as adrenaline surged through her. The weight of what had just happened settled like a stone in her chest. They had won a battle, but Bradford wasn't the kind of man who let his enemies walk away unscathed. As soon as Elijah pulled onto the darkened highway, Liana's phone vibrated. She hesitated before glancing at the screen. A blocked number. With a deep breath, she answered. A slow, deliberate chuckle greeted her. Did you really think this was over? Bradford's voice was low, controlled, but there was an edge to it, a barely restrained fury simmering beneath the surface. Liana's grip on the phone tightened. You lost, Bradford. You have nothing left to threaten me with. His chuckle deepened. That's adorable, he mused. But you forget. I've spent my career surviving worse. One little scandal won't bring me down. Liana's stomach twisted, but she refused to let him hear the fear in her voice. The world knows what you did. You can't spin your way out of this one. Bradford sighed theatrically. You really think that matters? The news cycle moves fast. A well-placed distraction, a fabricated counter-narrative, and soon no one will care about your sob story. Liana clenched her jaw. I don't need the world to care. I just need the law to. A pause. Then Bradford's voice turned colder. The law, Liana? Do you know how many judges owe me favors? How many prosecutors I can buy? Elijah's hands tightened on the steering wheel as he listened through the speaker. Liana caught his glance in the rearview mirror. He gave a small nod. Keep him talking. You sound nervous, Bradford, Liana pressed, forcing steel into her voice. That's new. A sharp exhale. You're making a mistake. This isn't about pride. It's about survival. Walk away now and I won't destroy you. Liana's pulse pounded, but a sudden realization settled in her chest. Bradford was grasping. If he truly had control over the situation, he wouldn't be calling her in the dead of night, trying to scare her into silence. She smiled to herself. You already lost, Bradford, she said, voice calm. And you know it. Another pause. Then for the first time, she heard something that almost sounded like doubt in his voice. "We'll see about that." The line went dead. Liana exhaled shakily, dropping the phone onto her lap. "He's rattled," she said aloud, still absorbing the weight of what just happened. Elijah nodded. "That means we're close, but it also means he's dangerous." Elena, still visibly shaken, finally spoke. "What now?" Elijah's eyes darkened with quiet determination. "We finish this." Liana looked out the window, the city lights glowing in the distance. She'd spent years living in fear, constantly seeking security in all the wrong places. But now, in this moment, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Control. This was the beginning of the end, and for the first time, she was ready. The morning sun barely crested the Miami skyline when Liana, Elijah, and Elena arrived at Nimbus Aviation's headquarters. The city moved as if nothing had changed, but to them, everything was different. The tension in the air was palpable. Bradford was wounded, and they all knew a desperate man would stop at nothing to save himself. Inside Elijah's office, the mood was serious. The previous night's call had confirmed what they feared. Bradford was scrambling to regain control, and that made him dangerous. Liana sat at the table, hands wrapped around a cup of untouched coffee, her mind racing. "We need to hit him before he can recover," Elijah said, pacing. "We can't give him time to bury this." Liana nodded. "The evidence is solid, but he's right about one thing. He still has power. He'll fight this with every dirty trick he has." Elena, still pale from her ordeal, leaned forward. "We need something bigger, something he can't manipulate." Elijah's phone buzzed, cutting the conversation short. He glanced at the screen, eyes narrowing. "It's the FBI." Liana's breath caught. He answered calmly. "This is Sinclair." The voice on the other end was clipped, professional. "Mr. Sinclair, we'd like to meet. We have reason to believe Bradford Callahan has been engaging in federal offenses, including fraud and bribery." Liana and Elena exchanged a glance. This was it. "We're ready," Elijah said. "We'll bring everything we have." Hours later, the federal building. The conference room was stark, the air thick with quiet authority. Across from Liana and Elijah, a pair of FBI agents sat, their faces unreadable as they examined the files and recordings laid before them. Finally, one of them, a tall woman with sharp blue eyes, closed the folder in front of her and looked at them with interest. "This is substantial," she admitted. "If everything checks out, Callahan won't just lose his company. He'll go to prison." Elijah nodded. "That's the goal." The agent leaned back in her chair. "But you understand, he won't go down quietly. If we move on this, he'll fight back. He'll try to discredit you, bury evidence, maybe worse." Liana's stomach twisted. She knew this. She had spent years watching powerful men bend the world to their will. But she also knew something else. Bradford had already lost the one thing that made him untouchable: control. "We know," she said firmly. "But it's time someone stood up to him." The agent studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, let's bring him down." The breaking point. It didn't take long. By evening, the first headlines hit the news. Federal investigation launched into Attendant CEO Bradford Callahan. Then came the financial collapse. Investors pull out amid scandal. Callahan's empire crumbling. Liana watched the reports unfold, heart pounding as journalists dug deeper. Leaked emails, secret bank accounts, offshore holdings. It was all coming out now. Then the final blow. The FBI issued an arrest warrant. Bradford Callahan was officially a fugitive. The call Liana's phone rang late that night. She almost didn't answer, but something in her gut told her to. Bradford's voice was quiet, almost resigned. "You really did it," she exhaled, gripping the phone tighter. "You did this to yourself." A dry chuckle. "Maybe, but don't fool yourself, Liana. You think taking me down fixes the system? There will always be another man like me." Liana's jaw clenched. "Then we'll fight him too." A pause, then, "Good luck with that." The line went dead. She stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down carefully. Elijah walked up beside her, his expression unreadable. "What did he say?" Liana shook her head. "Nothing that matters." Outside, the city buzzed with life. The world kept moving. But tonight, she wasn't afraid of what came next. Because for the first time, she knew exactly who she was. The morning air carried a strange stillness as Liana stood outside the federal courthouse, the towering columns casting long shadows over the gathered press. Camera crews jostled for position, reporters murmuring in anticipation. This was the moment the city had been waiting for. Inside, Bradford Callahan would finally face the full weight of his crimes. Liana tightened her coat around herself, feeling the chill despite the warmth of the rising sun. Elijah stood beside her, hands in his pockets, his presence a quiet anchor. "You ready for this?" he asked, voice low. She nodded, exhaling slowly. "More than ever." The doors to the courthouse swung open, and a swarm of federal agents escorted Bradford into view. His once impeccable suit looked slightly wrinkled, his normally confident stride stiff with tension. Even now he tried to maintain his carefully curated image, but Liana saw the cracks, his clenched jaw, the faint twitch in his fingers. He knew this was the end. Reporters shouted questions as cameras flashed. "Mr. Callahan, do you deny the allegations? Will you fight the charges? Are you guilty?" Bradford ignored them, his gaze sweeping the crowd, until it landed on Liana. For a moment they simply stared at each other. Liana had once feared this man. She had once believed he held all the power. But now, standing before him, she felt nothing but certainty. He was just another man who had thought himself untouchable until he wasn't. A slow, bitter smile curled at the edge of Bradford's lips. He leaned slightly toward her as he passed, his voice barely above a whisper. "You'll never change the system." Liana met his gaze, unwavering. "But I can change the story." And with that, he was led inside, disappearing behind cold metal doors. The weight that had pressed on her for years lifted, not all at once, but piece by piece. She had spent so long trying to hold on to a world that had never truly belonged to her. Now she was finally free. Elijah turned to her, studying her expression. "What now?" Liana inhaled deeply, letting the crisp morning air fill her lungs. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid of the answer. "Now," she said, a small but certain smile playing at her lips, "we build something better." Later that night, the celebration at Nimbus Aviation was modest, just a small gathering of people who had fought alongside them. Elena Carter, finally free from Bradford's grasp, sat quietly in the corner, sipping a glass of wine, her expression unreadable. Liana approached her cautiously. "So, what's next for you?" Elena exhaled, setting down her glass. "I don't know," she admitted. "I spent so many years just trying to survive in Bradford's world. Now that it's gone, I guess I have to figure out who I am without it." Liana nodded in understanding. "You're not alone in that." A pause. Then Elena met her eyes, a ghost of a smirk on her lips. "You know, you surprised me, Mercer." Liana laughed softly. "Yeah, well, I surprised myself too." Across the room, Elijah raised his glass. "To truth," he said simply. The others echoed the toast, and as glasses clinked, Liana felt something shift inside her. For the first time in her life, she wasn't chasing security. She wasn't seeking approval. She was simply standing in her own truth. And that, she realized, was more powerful than anything Bradford Callahan had ever owned. The following morning, the Miami sun painted streaks of gold across the sky, casting a warm glow over the city as Liana sat quietly on the balcony of her new apartment. The air smelled of salt and fresh beginnings, an unfamiliar sensation, yet one that felt strangely welcome. She cradled a cup of coffee between her hands, staring out over the endless blue of the ocean. No more hushed conversations in marble-lined offices. No more carefully controlled smiles, pretending to be someone she wasn't. For the first time in her life, she had no one to answer to but herself. Behind her, the sliding door opened, and Elijah stepped out, holding his own coffee, his presence grounding as ever. He leaned against the railing, studying her thoughtfully. "You seem different," he mused. Liana smiled slightly, taking a slow sip of her drink. "I feel different." She turned to face him, a quiet certainty in her eyes. "For years, I thought power meant being untouchable, being protected by the right people, in the right circles. But it was never about that, was it?" Elijah shook his head. "Power isn't about who you know or what you own. It's about what you stand for. And you, Liana, finally chose to stand for yourself." His words settled deep within her, more profound than he probably realized. She had spent so much time molding herself into someone she thought the world wanted her to be, only to realize the world had never held the answers she was searching for. The sound of her phone buzzing on the table interrupted the peaceful moment. Liana sighed, setting her coffee down and glancing at the screen. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Hello." A familiar voice greeted her. "Ms. Mercer, this is Sandra Ellis from the Rise Together Foundation. We saw your interview about Attendant and wanted to talk. We think you'd be an incredible voice for the kind of change we're fighting for." Liana's breath caught slightly. Rise Together, a national organization dedicated to exposing corporate corruption and advocating for ethical business practices. The old Liana would have hesitated, worried about stepping too far outside her comfort zone. But this new version of herself, the one who had faced down her fears, who had chosen courage over convenience, she already knew her answer. "I'd love to talk," she said, a smile forming. After ending the call, she turned back to Elijah, who had been listening quietly. "Good news?" he asked. Liana nodded. "A new path, a real one, this time." Elijah grinned. "I had a feeling you weren't done fighting yet." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "Number, I don't think I ever will be." The ocean stretched endlessly before her, the horizon shimmering with possibilities. She had no roadmap, no guarantees. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid, because she wasn't running anymore. She was finally moving forward, and that's the truth about power. It isn't about wealth, status, or control. It's about the choices we make when we stand at a crossroads. Liana spent years believing that security came from silence, from staying in line. But in the end, real strength wasn't in what she had. It was in what she was willing to fight for. So what would you do? If the system was rigged against you, would you risk everything to expose it? Drop a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts. And if you don't want to miss more stories like this, hit that subscribe button. Because trust me, there's always another truth waiting to be uncovered.